Welcome to Andy Staples On3. We can't get away from realignment. I was expecting to get back to actual football today. I promise there will be actual football on this show at some point. Cooper Beebe, Kansas State, best interior offensive lineman in the country according to a lot of the draftniks. You're going to hear from him today. We're going to talk actual football, but not before we talk realignment, because I got the guy who broke a massive realignment story on Wednesday. Dan Wetzel from Yahoo clued us in that there's a subgroup of Big Ten presidents examining potentially taking some more schools from the Pac-12. Dan, what is going on with that?
Yeah, they four presidents met and started exploratory talks, preliminary talks. Would we want to add more teams to the league? Obviously, USC and UCLA are coming next season, 2024. The first move that totally destabilized the Pac-12 and predictably set what happened yesterday in motion, where they didn't have as much media value because, hey, they no longer have LA. And they're looking and saying, do we want to go to 18 teams and add Oregon and Washington, which Fox and NBC and CBS are very supportive of, or apparently supportive of? Do we then want to go further and just own the West Coast and move the Big Ten brand into the Bay Area and take Stanford and Cal also and go to 20, which appeals academically and recruiting wise for not just players, but actual just regular students and things like that to presidents, but is less appealing to the TV people who would shell out the money. So they could stay at 16. We don't know. They could say, hey, look, this is enough. 16 is already very large. Or they could say, let's go for broke. The Pac-12 is breaking up. Let's add Oregon and Washington. Let's do the whole thing. Or they could do somewhere in the middle. We'll see. But the big dog, the Big Ten, is back on the back looking around at expansion possibilities.
I'm so glad somebody read the column I wrote at my old job the day after Texas and Oklahoma said they were going to the SEC. And that said, hey, Big Ten, take USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington, Stanford, and Cal. So I'm glad somebody read that.
Yeah.
I am surprised it took this long, I guess. But it seems to me, Dan, and I don't know about you, that they're kind of sitting in wait to see what happens with Arizona, Arizona State, and Utah. And if those guys go and leave the Pac-12, then the Big Ten's not dealing the death blow, even though they already kind of did.
Yeah, they do have this bit where they don't want to be the conference that killed another conference, especially their supposed alliance partner. As you know, it's a really beautiful friendship they had.
They looked each other in the eyes.
They looked each other in the eyes, and now they're going to kill it. I find this comically hysterical and perfectly encapsulates college athletics. Well, we're not going to kill you, although we already killed you. It's like we gave you the original disease that put you on your deathbed, but we're not going to give you we're not going to put the bullet in your head at the end to kill you. I mean, look, taking USC and UCLA is what will eventually kill the Pac-12. Maybe there is a scenario where it could survive, but yes, they're trying to see if Arizona goes and all of a sudden this thing is really rocky, or if Utah and Arizona State go with them to the Big 12. We don't know if the Big 12 can really get to 16 teams. Will their media partners keep adding $31 million a year to the bill to add Arizona State, Utah? That is one roadblock here. We don't know yet. So a lot could happen, but if this thing falls, yeah, they're circling the carcass and saying, what do we want? We're just going to pick this apart, scrap heap, whatever you got to do. And it's quite amazing because they could essentially probably get Oregon and Washington, Cal and Stanford at a discounted rate.
Yeah.
60-70% of revenue. The Big Ten's going to make 50 to 65 million a year in media rights. I don't think it's quite settled exactly what it's going to be. 70% of 65 million is still 42 million. That's 10 more than the big, 70% of 50 is 35 million. It's still
so
more
jealous about your math skills.
Yeah.
I can't do
amazing.
this on the fly. But
Andy, I went to UMass and it's a tremendous academic school. I'm surprised the Big Ten hasn't stepped in to grab it for the academics. But
bring back Marcus Camby, and they might.
We're the Harvard of Massachusetts, except for Harvard,
Harvard.
Or the other Harvards. But anyway, we, that's where you're at, and you go, they can get these guys maybe on the cheap, and they can own the West Coast. Yeah. The whole thing makes no sense. You have a 6-team flank out west.
Well, have them play the non-revenue sports as a league, those 6 teams.
Right.
You're not sending volleyball players to Piscataway.
And you get the 4th window that maybe ESPN comes back to the table and throws some more millions on the fire. But a 20-team league. Do you play the conference championship game in the Rose Bowl?
I mentioned this on the show the other day, but when I interviewed Kevin Warren when he was still the Big Ten commissioner at the Sports Business Journal thing in Las Vegas last year, I said, was it difficult deciding that you weren't going to be making a deal with ESPN? And his answer I thought was very interesting, because he said, "Oh, we haven't decided not to do a deal with ESPN. There's still a chance that could happen." I know Kevin Warren was keen on the idea of adding more from the West Coast. And so that said to me, "Oh, you'd sell the late night windows to ESPN." And that does seem like something that would make sense. Now, here's where the irony of ironies would be. Let's say all this happens. Let's say those 3 schools go to the Big 12 and the Big 10 takes those 4 schools and makes a deal with Apple to pay for it.
Yeah.
Now, they wouldn't all be on Apple, because some of their games would be on NBC or CBS or Fox or the Big Ten Network, but some of their games would be on Apple at that point.
Could Apple jump in that way? It's possible. I mean, they, part of these deals was cutting down on the bidding. If you eliminate a conference, there's less you have to pay there's less inventory out there for TV networks to have to bid against each other. Like the Pac-12 became a less appealing thing that actually drives down the cost of other things. So this is all business. It's all money. TV networks are driving all of this realignment. They don't care about the Apple Cup. They don't care whether you're ever going to have a chance to actually win your league.
Yes.
I mean, good luck to Stanford in the Big Ten. My goodness. Or Cal. They don't care about tradition. They care about how many big brands can we get on TV that'll deliver us 4 million plus viewers, 8 million plus, 10 million plus. And that's all they care about. And this all of college athletics, no matter how much time they spend crying in front of Congress or holding little night commissions or issuing reports out of Indianapolis, this entire operation is being run by a couple television networks. That's it.
Well, and the Big Ten especially. This is run by Fox. And here's the part I think is interesting, because you mentioned Cal and Stanford, which definitely seems like something the Big Ten presidents would prefer and not something Fox would want at all. But I just spent a lot of my day watching a trustees meeting in Tallahassee. Well, I guess it was on Zoom. Somebody was in a car. But Florida State trustees meeting where they basically declared, we're done with the ACC. We don't want to be here anymore. And it got me thinking, because your story had just come out. And so I was thinking about this. If you're Fox, how much more would you rather add Clemson and Florida State than Cal and Stanford to the Big Ten?
Fox would absolutely like it. But there is more to this if the presidents are making deals. And so I've done a bunch of interviews. I don't want to repeat myself, but like, you're trying to get the Big Ten to own the Bay Area. We're the schools of the Bay Area, tech companies, Silicon Valley, all the alums.
Very Larry Scott to me.
Yes, but regular students, right? Like, I know this, like at the University of Michigan, I think their freshman class that's coming in, the most students entering the class are from the state of Michigan, obviously. Number 2 is, I believe, is California this year. So they're getting more kids from California to go to Michigan than Illinois or Ohio or any of the states right next to it. California has the people in California have money. They're willing to chase. So you want
that's real economics there too.
It's real economics.
An out-of-state student pays 2 to 3 times what an in-state
full
student
boat,
pays,
and they're elite students, right?
Yep. It's why I always say Nick Saban is worth about 20 times what they pay him at Alabama, because he's the one who's allowed them to take more out-of-state students because they get more applications because they're on TV all the time. And it is part of it. And
Bama Rush. And Bama Rush.
True.
Okay, do not the sororities, the sorority bit is doing it too. But yeah, that's your thing. So there is another economic in there. And I think that's what frustrates Florida State. And I don't blame them. And Florida State fans go, wait, what is this garbage? Why are we, who historically, and they're back. They haven't had a great 10 years, but they're back.
Yeah,
to being pretty
good. They did win a national title 10 years ago.
They peaked and then dropped. But, they had a couple lean years. But whatever. We've earned this. We've earned a seat at this table. How the heck aren't we at it? How are we 30 million behind? But not everything is about putting the best teams together.
Right.
And so, if you're Cal, and look at let's say you go around the Big Ten. Let's say you're talking to Purdue.
Mm-hmm.
You say, hey, man, you want to add Clemson and Florida State? There's 2 more teams we probably can't beat.
That's exactly right.
Or you get a trip out to San Francisco. You see your rich alums. You beat the hell out of Cal. It's all good. Hey, how about a little something for the lower thing? So there's a lot there, and that's what the question is: will the pieces fit? And I get Florida State's frustration. What's their solution other than continuing to scream, we want more money? And why would the ACC give them more money if they know you're leaving anyway?
This is what I've been saying since that was brought up as a solution in the ACC. It doesn't make any, if you're the president of Boston College or Syracuse right now, why are you going to agree to give Florida State more money? By the time the conference eventually breaks up in 2036, which it would, you're not working there anymore. You're just the idiot who gave them more money. So they're not going to do that. Florida State's not going to buy that. I mean, they had a trustee get up and say, hey, there's a deadline of August 15th to declare that you're not going to be in the conference after next year. I don't think they're going to hit that deadline, but this trustee is like, we have to have a plan in place to do that within the next 12 months. They're going to try to leave. I'm not sure they have a plan. I want to know what it is if they have one.
If it was that easy to get out of this grant of rights, someone would be out of the grant of rights, right? I don't know. I don't know. Clemson and Florida, they also all agreed unanimously to this thing not that long ago. And I will say this, if the media companies continue to struggle, this deal actually might not end up being that bad by the end.
Right. ESPN may be like, I don't know if we can afford this anymore in 2034.
So we'll see. This thing may zoom back around a little bit. But I understand it is it's very frustrating if you're watching this show, if you listen to our podcast, you do any of that, you love the sport and you love all of the sport, and you love that they play that a team in Manhattan, Kansas can play, and then a team in Boise, Idaho.
A lot of the sport if all of this
the regional rivalries and the traditions of that, and not just hey, great. Because one of the things, we talk about this a lot, one of the most amazing things about college athletics is they have gotten the fans to root for revenue share.
It is crazy.
They wear it like, I'm 31.7 million, the Big Ten. We're only going to get this. We'll be 5 million below. It's not your money. You're not getting the money. Your school isn't going out of business. These schools are rich. They could raise.
They're not going to charge less for tickets.
They don't charge less for tickets. They don't sell you the hoodie for less. They don't sell your parking place for less. They find more way. Oh, we're going to sell beer now. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Nobody sits around and goes, hey, you know what? My NFL team, we only went 6-11 this year, but the owner, my God, the owner made $400 million on this thing. I'm so excited for him. Like, come on, you want to win, and so it's like, but they're so into it, and then they just waste the money. Hey, let's do another new locker room. Let's buy out that crappy offensive coordinator we shouldn't have bought. We should, all the different stuff. And so you sit around and you go, you're winning less. You're not playing the teams you want to play. But your athletic department is rich. and you can hire 14 more deputy athletic directors. Is that real? Like, you're Nebraska. Like, how much fun is this? Great. You're rich. Is this fun?
It's fun for the people who are rich. So that's why they keep doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I did some math, and I realized that's not my strong suit. But I was listening to you and Ross Dellinger and Pat Forty on the College Football Inquirer podcast, and you were mentioning Arizona, and we're talking about $10 million probably difference between staying in the Pac-12 and going to the Big 12. And I did the math on the student fee. If you raise the student fee $200 on everybody, so $200 on the 37,000 undergrads and on the 9,000 grad students, or however, it's 44,000 total. I told you I'm bad at math. Okay. But essentially, you raise almost $9 million right there, $200 a year, jacking that fee up. Schools all over the FBS do this stuff, and they have a fairly small fee at Arizona compared to like UCF, but you could do that, and that money's there, and then you hit up a donor for the rest of it. You could pull that off, and it's the same amount of money.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. We talked about this. They charge about $100 in a student fee right now, athletic fee at the University of Arizona. You pop that up to $300. It's still below, and I think I still got the math around here. I think somebody was charging, I don't know. UCF, Central Florida, collects $28 million in athletic student fees. $28 million.
It's a pretty great conference TV deal.
They don't talk about that. Yeah. They don't want that out there. They talk about something, right? So you can come to 10. I've heard this a million times with Notre Dame. Notre Dame, not making as much money as the Big Ten. No, they need the money. Have you ever walked around Notre Dame? I dare anyone to step foot on that campus and say, man, if only this place had a buck or two. Their most famous building has a golden dome on it. They have more money than they know what to. Money is not the problem.
You almost said they have more money than God, but
they do not. But they're the ones paying them, right? They're the middle guy. They're his banker. No, people. Well, look how much money. And this is my thing with Clemson and Florida State. I know this isn't good. Purdue's making $30 million more. Michigan State's making. That's true. That is all true. But you know what Purdue doesn't have? Atlanta, an hour and a half away. Mm-hmm. Okay. They don't have access to those recruits. They don't have sunshine. They don't have other things.
They have astronauts. They made a lot of astronauts.
They have astronauts. They got a lot of engineers. They're smart. There's a lot that goes into building a winner than just having the most money. Would you, in the last 10 years, would you rather be Indiana football with tons of money, or would you like to be an hour and a half away at Cincinnati with less money and tons of wins? I think it'd be a little more fun to be Cincinnati. A lot goes into winning. It's not just how much money we have. These ADs who are controlling the money and get paid off this money have sold this to the fans like it's the be all and end all. It just isn't. It just isn't.
And it's not changing though. And I do think there's pressure on not just the ADs, but the pressure on the presidents from the fans because they don't want to feel in any way disadvantaged. Now,
yes, but that's because they're sold that it's just like
right.
Yes, there's tons of pressure on it. Everyone's flipping out. Oh my God, we're Arizona. We got to give it all up because of $10 million. You go, hold on, why? Your basketball program's still going to be good.
Yeah,
you got enough to like your football team. It's going to be fine.
Although if I'm Arizona and I'm a big basketball fan, I'm like, yeah, let's be in the same conference as Baylor and Kansas.
But that might make it harder to win. That might make it harder to win.
Yeah, that's true. But your gut, what do you think happens? Is it because this could go a lot of ways. The nuclear scenario that we've been discussing, I still don't think is greater than 50-50 right now.
I agree. It's hard to predict, and it's hard to put a number because a lot could happen. Let me say this. We kind of alluded to it earlier. Let's say the Big 12 goes to Fox and ESPN? They're with Fox and ESPN. Mm-hmm. Says, okay, we're going to go to 16. We got Arizona State, and Utah. And Fox and ESPN are going, look, man, that's another we got to add 3 more. So that's another $123 million. Or no, that's to be 90.
That's with Colorado too. Yeah.
Yeah. Colorado, whatever. We're not paying that. We don't have that. We're not just going to give everyone a prorated deal.
So
we'll take Arizona.
I had somebody in the Big 12 yesterday tell me they definitely got enough to do 14
for to
But
14.
the TV folks are good with 14, and that they have a path to 16.
Okay, so let's say if they get that done, then Armageddon's going to hit. But what if it's only 14? So I don't think this is a great path, but it's just Arizona.
Then it chills out, I think.
Right. And the Big Ten says, well, we're not going to be the one that they're going to take this little ethical high ground and say, well, we're not going to be the one to kill it. Also, they know at the long run, they're going to get them whenever they need to anyway.
Yeah.
So if Arizona State and Utah stay and the Big Ten says, we're not going to take Oregon and Washington, then there's 8 Pac-12 teams and you add San Diego State and maybe you add SMU or you add Boise, whatever you do, it all chills out. It's not that hard to see that happening also.
Yeah. And the thing is, if you're Oregon and Washington at that point and Utah, you look at that and you go, listen, there's an automatic playoff berth for the 6 highest ranked conference champs. We're just going to trade that over and over.
Yep.
We have access. And I think there wouldn't, because people keep asking, are they going to change that particular rule with the playoff when the new contract hits 2 years after the changes? I don't think so. If the Pac-12 is that, if it's what we just said, if it is disintegrated or somehow merged with the Mountain West, they probably drop that number to 5.
Yeah, that'd be 5, or who knows? Who knows what they do? But I agree. And let's say, look, we haven't gotten to the playoff. I think the playoff could be a stabilizer for all conferences because a path to get in becomes your thing. Gonzaga doesn't leave the West Coast Conference because it doesn't need to. Right. They're not sitting there going, we don't have enough money. No, we just do our own thing and it works because we're really good at basketball. We can still recruit. We can get to the Final Four. So not only that, playoff share of revenue is going to be based on how many teams you get in, right? You get one team in a 10-team league, you got 10 slices. You put one in a 16, you're getting a smaller share. So there's a little more there. But mainly it's like, what do you get out of winning? What do you get out of late season games that you're in playoff contention? Selling out your stadiums and all of those things, there's a big advantage to that, especially someone like an Arizona State that's still trying to build up or rebuild their program. Utah, Oregon, they pretty much fill up. But there is definitely a chance that this fades out. But I think that big thing is, can the Big 12 expand to 16, or is the media partners going to say you're stuck at 14?
I think they can do 16 if Arizona State and Utah say yes.
Yeah, my guess is that will happen, and we'll end up with a 20-team Big 10 or an 18-team,
The great land grab.
I guess I would give more likely that this is it, but I do think there's a chance it doesn't happen. I don't know.
Yeah, it will be fascinating to watch. One more story I wanted to run by you, because I know we talked about Hunter Deckers last night, the Iowa State quarterback. You guys on your podcast talked about him and an Iowa baseball player who got caught placing bets. The news out of Iowa City today, Iowa backup kicker Aaron Blom, charge of tampering with records. So he apparently placed, this is according to the Cedar Rapids Gazette, approximately 170 underage sports wagers, including a bet on an Iowa football game. And Dan, you're not going to believe it, but he bet the under. He bet the under on the 2021 Iowa State game, which he didn't play in. So I'm not accusing anyone of shaving points or anything.
Right.
But the total on that game was 45.5. And I know what you're thinking. What? That sounds awfully high. But in the Vegas remains undefeated category, the final score of that game was Iowa 27, Iowa State 17. So 44.5.
Yeah.
Ticket cashed. Unfortunately, you may never
by
get
half
to play
a point.
again.
By half a point.
Yeah.
27. Yeah.
Or no, by a point and a half, I think.
Point and a half. Okay. Well, that is the most Iowa State bet of all time. Gambling scandal. We also got the moms setting up accounts for these kids. What is that? That's not a good idea.
Right. Like,
not good parenting.
Give your kid a sip of beer every once in a while, but we're not funding your gambling or having your gambling be under my name. Like, I don't want your crappy picks. Like, I see my kid picking games for free. Like, I don't want his picks under my account.
We have talked about this off air before. U.S. Integrity that monitors all this stuff. Absolutely terrifying. If you have downloaded any of them, DraftKings, BetMGM, whatever, FanDuel, they know where you are right now within 3 feet.
Yeah.
Like they know where your phone is. They know what you're doing right now. They're probably listening to this podcast. I don't know.
Well, I hope
they are right on top of everything. If you're involved in college athletics, just don't. It's just don't. You just don't gamble. You're going to get
my
busted.
thing is, like, I don't care if some college football player puts $5 on an NBA game. That doesn't bother me. But common sense, do not bet on a game your team is involved in.
The NCAA cares. You can't bet on the NBA because you can bet on horse racing,
pari-mutuels,
UFC, stuff like that. Just take a couple years off. Like, it's not the time for this because they're going to catch you. And mom's phone is not that ain't going to work.
Well, and that's the thing. I was initially reading it and being like, well, how come mom and dad didn't say, like, well, we made those bets? And I realized, oh, no, they're geo-located. Like, they know exactly where you were and where mom and dad were when those bets were placed. And if you weren't in the same place, you can't do anything.
100%. They can tell you what part of the locker room made the bet. If there's a bet right before, they can tell you whether it was the referee's room. They're going to nail you. What you give away on that is amazing.
It is the new big brother. Dan, this has been fascinating.
Always fun.
I know you're busy. You got more stuff to do. You probably got more interviews to do, but we're going to have to get back together when the dust settles and figure out what the hell happened with all this stuff.
Let's do it. Always fun to be on, man. Congrats on the new show. Really happy for you.
Thank you, sir. Listen to Dan on the College Football Inquirer podcast with Ross Dellinger and Pat Forty, and read him at yahoosports.com. Well, I promised we would get back to football, and we will get back to football. We've got to do it at some point. We've got to get back to football, and I think this is a great way to do it. I've told some of the sports information directors when I call to request interviews with people that we want to be a safe space for offensive linemen on this show. And I want to make sure that you get to hear from the best of the best offensive linemen. You've already heard from Olu Fashanu, who may be the first offensive lineman drafted in the NFL next year. He's Penn State's left tackle. He's going to be playing in a lot of huge games this year. The next guy you're going to hear from, another one probably going to be drafted fairly high. He's one of the best interior linemen in the country. He could be in an NFL camp right now, but he and three of his teammates who also were starters on Kansas State's offensive line are back, and they're trying to get a second straight Big 12 title. Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk to the great Cooper Beebe. All right, so we're struggling with Cooper a little bit, but I do promise that we have Cooper available for you. Here he is right now. Joined now by Kansas State offensive lineman Cooper Beebe, and I call you offensive lineman, Cooper, because you have started at every position except center in your career. Is there snapping in your future, or do you snap after practice because you're one of those guys that just wants to be ready in case?
Yeah, no, I definitely this spring I've definitely been getting the snaps in, and that's something I'll be working on. You can never not add value to yourself. So if that comes to it, and I need to play center, I'll be ready.
So you are in the Little Apple right now. You are surrounded by many, many hats that you have collected over the years. You don't have to be there right now. You could be in some NFL camp right now, and you've got a bunch of teammates who are now back for their 6th year of eligibility. How did you guys all decide, hey, we're coming back for one more time?
Yeah, so after the season, the O-line kind of got together at one of the local spots here in Manhattan, So Long Saloon, and we just kind of sat down and talked, and it was kind of a group thing. We felt like we weren't done with our college careers. We thought there's more out there. So we kind of came together and decided we're gonna have one more shot at this, and we're gonna bring everybody back and see if we can elevate from last year.
Whose idea was it to name it "Bring Back the Beef"? Because KT Levison, Hayden Gillum, Christian Duffy, these are all multi-year starters who are coming back for their 6th year. You're calling it "Bring Back the Beef." That's great branding. I think there's probably an NIL deal in there somewhere. Who came up with that?
I want to say one of our old GAs, Hayden Wall, he kind of redesigned. I think I have it. Hold on.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, if you're watching on the video right now, we've
So I have a hat that he made. It's
that's beautiful.
hat he designed from the Kansas Beef logo. And I don't know, it just kind of stuck. We had a lot of interest in that, and people really loved it, so it kind of just stuck. So I'd say he's kind of the designer of that.
The So Long Saloon seems like a weird place to meet when you're not saying so long, like when you're going to say we're back.
Yeah, we were just that's definitely one of the top places to eat in Aggieville, so it just happened to be where we went.
Were there any Aggieville donuts consumed before or after?
No.
Those things are spectacular.
Absolutely.
That's what. I'm going to give you a chance to brag on your town here, because for those who have not been to the Little Apple, it is one of America's great college towns. Explain to the folks what it's like to be a student in Manhattan, Kansas.
It's a great time. Especially I will say if you're of age, stuff elevates a lot better in this town. But there's just definitely a lot of stuff to do, and going out with friends, meeting new people. Aggieville is definitely the place to be, especially after games.
The first time I went to Manhattan, I stayed at a hotel that was near a coffee shop called Radina's Bakehouse, and they had what was called a butter flight. Basically, they had 4 different kinds of butter, and they just give you a bunch of bread, and you could test all the butters. And I was like, this is my kind of place. So let's talk about this comeback for you, Cooper, because obviously you're coming off a Big 12 title. Very, big season. Lots of expectations ahead. Will Howard's back at quarterback. Chris Kleiman has had a chance to really get his guys in now. How excited are you guys for this season?
Oh, we're beyond excited. We kind of talked about after last year. We're trying to do more this year, and like you said, having all of us back, dudes like Will taking over fully as the quarterback. We're super excited. We're trying to be, the first team in K-State history to win back-to-back Big 12 championships. That's never been done here, and we got the team to do it. So we're super excited.
How much of all this is, the place in history, be it for the team or for yourself? I read something we were talking about looking on the wall and seeing Jordy Nelson's name and Darren Sproles' name and Colin Klein, your offensive coordinator's name. What would it mean to you to be one of those guys?
Oh, it would mean the world to me. I love Manhattan, Kansas. It'll always be a part of my heart. But I want to cement myself in history. When years down the road, when I bring my kids to games, I want to be able to look up there and be like, hey, look, that's your dad. He did great things here. And yeah, it's just something you'll remember for the rest of your life. And
also, your little brother's a freshman this year.
Yep.
And he's even bigger than you. How's he doing? How's he adjusting to camp, and how were the workouts for him the first time?
It definitely was a slap in the face when he got here, but it is for most freshmen. But no, he's doing really well. He finally, got to the point where he wasn't struggling through workouts, and now he's excited. We got fall camp coming up, and I don't think they're quite understand what fall camp entails yet, but they'll surely learn here soon.
So let's talk about how you got to K-State, because I thought I was reading about your recruitment, and something your dad said struck me. He said that he was telling you and your high school coaches all along, hey, he's going to play offensive line, even though you were telling college coaches, hey, I want to play D tackle.
Yeah. So, just, one of the things, when I growing up, I was just like, offense, never gets the love. It's always the defensive players that get all the love. So, going into college, I was like, I want to play defense. I want to be that guy that, gets all the love, makes the big plays. But, when we got to K-State, it was me and my dad walking in the locker room, and we went over to my locker and we saw 50 on my nameplate, and I was supposed to
get 98, right?
Yeah. So we kind of looked at each other and goes, oh, it might be a playing offensive line. And then, of course, right after that, I go in, talk to Coach Kleiman and Coach Riley, our offensive line coach. And sure enough, I didn't even last a minute or anything at defensive line. I got moved straight to offense, but, it's worked out pretty well.
I was going to say, because you say, oh, there's no love, but I was on your mom's Twitter feed before this interview, which when it comes out of my mouth like that sounds terrible. I'm sorry. But your mom has pictures of you and her in Barnes and Noble, and there's the Phil Steele college football preview, and you are on the cover. And she made you take pictures with that. I'm looking at that picture, and when people were watching this video, there will be that photo. We will be showing it. So I'm warning you now. But you don't look like you really want to take that picture.
Well, it's a funny story. So I was actually down in Frisco for the O-line Masterminds camp, and we were just killing time walking through the mall, and I didn't even realize it at first, but I just saw the college book, and I was like, oh, I'll just go see what they said about K-State. And sure enough, we walked over there, and I'm like, whoa, I'm on the cover of this. So no, it was a pretty cool experience, and my parents were definitely excited for that. So I definitely had to – my mom forced me to take some pictures, and she bought like 8 books, I think.
That's awesome. Well, Phil will appreciate the business. He's the best. So – you mentioned that O-line Masterminds camp. That's Duke Manyweather is the coach who runs that. He always brings in the star. Like there's always Lane Johnson or Steve Hutchinson. Some really big time people. What was it like to be around those guys?
It was just a phenomenal experience. Just to see, like you said, you got a lot of Hall of Fame guys that come in and kind of give their perspective on different things, and just to see how they approach the game, and what the little stuff they do to make them great. It's just really eye-opening. As offensive linemen, you kind of take that knowledge in and kind of add to your game, or add to your routines and different stuff like that, because you're wanting to be in their position one day.
I read that you talked to Steve Hutchinson for 45 minutes about stance, which sounds like the sexiest O-line conversation ever. How did that go?
It was funny because, throughout the whole camp, one of the most important things, and they talked about is stance. And you wouldn't think, it's a big deal, but, being able to do everything out of one stance, making it look the same the entire time, is really key to be an offensive lineman. You don't want to, tip people off. You're doing certain plays and stuff like that. So it was kind of eye-opening. You like, okay, I get in a stance every play, whatever, no big deal. It's, muscle memory. But, to really hear what they had to say about it was pretty eye-opening.
And those guys have it down to this granular detail, because this is not like, the difference between a light stance and a heavy stance. You're not going to let some D lineman know you're pulling, that sort of thing. But what is it like when an NFL guy, longtime NFL veteran explains how to not tip the play?
No, it's really interesting, just because they have a whole lot of different perspective and like information when it comes to that. It's something, like you said, as simple as, weight distribution or different stuff like that, just to see them go into so much detail that you didn't even realize that was there. Honestly, yeah, it's just, super eye-opening. It was such a great experience.
So what would your ideal scenario be for this season? Because you guys have put a lot of planning into this, and it feels like, I always feel like when you have this many experienced offensive linemen coming back, it's the easiest building block to a special season. But what would your dream scenario be here?
I'd say, win another Big 12 championship, and, get in the playoff, and, see if we can win it all would be our dream scenario.
So as you're doing this, you're also still progressing toward the NFL draft, which you probably would have been drafted pretty high had you left. But now you've got, Pro Football Focus has you as the best interior offensive lineman coming out this year. Do you think about that? Are you aware of that? Are you following that? Or is that something you can't worry about?
It's you're definitely aware of it. You can't get away from it. I get tagged and all sorts of different things, and he's one of the best returning, blah blah blah. But it's something you got to put on the back burner. I'm focused on this season, and I'm gonna have a great season, and let the NFL play out after that. But I gotta worry about getting wins and having a good season this year. So you kind of just put it on the back burner.
Do you have a favorite play that you've been tagged in over the last few months by the Draftniks? Because they're always looking like, Oh, we found this one from Cooper. This is a gem. Do you have one that you were like, ooh, that's pretty awesome?
Yeah, definitely. It's against Tulane. I was pulling out.
Yeah, I remember.
I knocked down 2 dudes, which I didn't even realize at the time. Yeah, no, I get tagged in that one, every other day, it seems like. So that'd probably be one of the best ones I get tagged in.
What was that like when y'all were watching it back for the first time and you realized what happened?
It was pretty cool. I think, it probably didn't help that we lost. So
right, yeah.
It's not something you you don't really look for the good plays, I guess, when you lose. But no, it was pretty cool because nobody really realized it. And, you just coaches just tip your hat. You're like, wow, that's a phenomenal play. And you don't even realize you did it. But yeah, it didn't really matter to me. We were lost, so I was more frustrated about that more than anything.
So you've played both tackle positions and both guard positions in college. Do you prefer guard to tackle?
Yeah, I would rather play guard. I think my body type definitely suits playing inside a lot more. But when I played tackle, they needed somebody to play tackle, and I wanted to play, so I was like, I'll go for it. I'll give it my best shot. But I would definitely say there's more to like at guard for me than there is to tackle.
You sound like, when you say that, it's contact. That's what we're talking about, right? Contact against fellow 300+ pounders, because it's not pass setting against King Felix every day in practice. I'm sure that was an adventure with a first round edge rusher.
Absolutely. I enjoy when dudes don't try to run away from you. At the edge position, they're all about avoiding contacts, but right here in the middle, it's all about contact. That's all you get. And that's it's something I enjoy. I didn't have the longest arms out there at tackle, and dudes were quite a bit faster than I was. So it definitely made stuff hard on me, but I was able to get it done.
All right. Well, and you've also brought back the beef. 4 returning starting offensive linemen at K-State, about 1 million years combined experience. You're the young guy in that group. What's that like?
No, it's funny because, like you said, I've played for so long, and you think I would be the old guy, but to know that there's dudes that are on the O-line, is a dude that's married, another dude that's engaged, and I'm the young guy, and it's cool because even though I'm the young guy, I think a lot of them still look to me for advice and different stuff like that. Just to know that the guys kind of rely on me is a good feeling, and it's always a fun dynamic because I always make fun of how old I am, just to know that there's even older people on our team. Like, how's that even possible? But no, it's definitely something you kind of look at and you're like, wow, I'm still the young guy on the O line.
I was reading that when you went to Big 12 Media Days, it was only the second time in your life that you'd worn a suit. Are you prepared? Because you're early 20s now. Are you prepared for the number of weddings you're going to have to go to? Like, you better get used to the suit.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely, I think, more prepared now. But yeah, it's getting close to that age where wedding season's coming for a lot of my friends. So, it'll be interesting. I'm not a huge dress-up guy, but you got to do what you got to do. So,
next time we see you in a suit might be draft night.
Hey, that's the plan.
Unless you win the Heisman. I want to see you in the tux at the Heisman ceremony. I'm all for an O-lineman winning the Heisman. So, and if anybody's going to win it, you, Olu Fashanu from Penn State, who we interviewed last week, and we talked steak with. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, we need to start a tradition here on this show. This is a fairly new show. Olu was talking about what his dream steak is. He's a tomahawk, ribeye, medium rare guy. So I'm giving you the whole cow, and you can cook it however you want it. What's the dream?
Oh, I would go ribeye, medium rare for sure.
Beautiful. It's an O-line thing, I think. I know. I have a feeling every O-lineman I talk to will have the same answer, and it does my heart good. Cooper, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
That was awesome. That is Cooper Beebe, and I tell you what, that guy is a lot of fun. I cannot wait to see what he does this year. Remember, 3 other starting offensive linemen from that K-State team last year are back. Those guys are 6-year seniors. Cooper is a senior. This is a veteran group, and it's going to be very exciting to see what they can do. Now, we're going back to a little more realignment talk, but also some coach talk, because we had Justin Hopkins from Scoopduck on. He covers Oregon. Scoopduck is the On3 site covering Oregon. And obviously Oregon is in the mix for this deal. We talked to Justin a little bit before Dan Wetzel's story broke, but we obviously covered a lot of the ground that we would have covered afterward anyway. And yeah, it's very interesting to see where Oregon sits, because from a brand standpoint, they may be one of the best on the board. Oregon, we don't know if Florida State or Clemson or anybody else can get out of the ACC right now. Of the schools that are movable right now, Oregon's probably the biggest brand on the board. Talked about that. We also talked about Dan Lanning's new contract and how Oregon may have solved for keeping their coach, which is something that's been an issue for them lately. We're joined now by Justin Hopkins from Scoopduck, part of the On3 network. And Justin, we keep talking about Arizona State, and Utah in terms of what happens with the Pac-12. But Oregon, arguably the biggest brand in the Pac-12, where do they stand in terms of this potential TV deal, in terms of other realignment? Where is Oregon right now?
Oregon's probably been the most interesting because, as you said, they probably have the most weight to throw around in the conference, with Washington right there as well. Oregon and Washington, the top two. But Oregon's been probably the quietest of everybody throughout everything. They just really haven't said much. Hey, yeah, we're committed to the Pac-12 if it can work, but not like they're saying that every other day. So, for me, I think, just from what we know, and we could be way off, but I think Oregon is committed to keeping some form of the Pac-12 conference alive if it makes sense. But I also think that, and you might believe this or might not, we're at the forefront of conference realignment, in my opinion. I think the whole thing is going to continue to change over the next 3 to 6 years. And so I think if you're Oregon, you're afraid of getting locked into something too long-term, no matter what it is, Pac-12, Big 10, Big 12, whatever, any of those scenarios. I think you're afraid of getting locked into something too long-term, because I feel that, and I believe Oregon believes this, we're at the forefront of conference realignment that's going to probably really, shake a major shape in the next 3 to 6 years.
Yeah, and Dennis Dodd had a story in CBSSports.com today that was very interesting, talking about what if a private equity company came in and funded a conference, and you could break off some from the ACC and some from the Big 12 and Oregon and Washington, and make a bespoke conference that somebody just pays for. And 5 years ago we'd have been like, that sounds insane. And now it's like, yeah, I'd believe pretty much anything at this point.
Yeah, I mean, Live Golf popped up out of nowhere, right? So
yeah. Let's not get the Saudis involved.
Right.
Yeah. These are public universities. I don't know if the states are going to go for that. But no, it's true. It's very interesting, because Oregon does feel like they have a big brand, but the not getting locked in part feels important. The other part of it is playoff access. If a version of the Pac-12 survives, it feels like Oregon, Washington, if Utah stays, those three are just slugging it out for a spot every single year.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think a lot of fans don't see that, like close to Oregon, close to Washington. They don't see that. And if you take a step back and say, hey, man, you top three, maybe if Stanford can continue to develop, maybe you top four, you're slugging it out. That's probably the easiest path to the playoff if you can remain in some sort of conference that remains competitive financially. A move to the Big 10 is going to make that really difficult, not just because there's great programs out there. That's a lot of travel, and big travel. And I don't think fans are really kind of thinking long-term. I think, they're thinking short-term, like, oh, the Pac can't survive. It can survive. It's actually not that hard to, imagine them surviving. But if they're only making $20 million a year, yeah, they're going to continue dying the slow death.
Is the playoff access thing? It feels like that's a piece that's important to Oregon's administration, at least from people I've talked to over the last year or so.
Well, so the way I feel about this is, Colorado, for example, and Arizona, for example, I don't know that they have the resources financially that Oregon does or Washington does, right? So I think schools need to take these decisions and make it for themselves. So Oregon, let's say they're losing $10 million a year in revenue, media deal revenue, they can sustain that. They could figure out a way to come up with that money and remain competitive. Washington could probably do the same. Arizona and Colorado, I don't think could manage that quite as easily. So they needed to make a decision for them, which they felt, hey, we're going to take the Big 12 in Colorado's case. We're going to go to the Big 12 and make sure we're getting that set amount of money. But if you're Oregon and Washington, with what it sounds like the proposed deal is, you're almost betting on yourself to remain in the pack under this revised deal and saying, hey, we believe we can win games. And if we win games, we're going to be rewarded financially for it. So not everybody has to make the same decision Colorado does, in my opinion.
Yeah. And the thing I find interesting about what was floated out in terms of the TV deal, and we don't know exactly what the numbers are, but the idea of a subscription service and you get more money the more you sell, it does feel like Oregon and Washington, because they have the biggest and most passionate fan bases, would be doing most of the heavy lifting on that one too. So I wonder if they could possibly get a little bit more because they're selling more subscriptions if that goes that way.
Yeah, and should you win, I wonder if there's escalators like, hey, you get to keep whatever bowl money you get. That'll go 100% to you. Or if you make a playoff, you get to keep that money, or you win a national championship, you get to keep that money. If you start betting on yourself, all of a sudden you're talking about maybe making 40 million instead of 20, but it is a gamble.
Yeah. And Oregon, it feels like, they've been so close. They make the national championship game in 2014 and in 2010. Phil Knight had invested so much into the program. Is it the feeling of they need to win a national championship at some point? Is that the last frontier right now?
It really is. I think regardless of any of this, I think with Dan Lanning's contract that was recently renegotiated and some of these other things, I think that you're saying, Phil Knight saying, hey, look, whatever it takes to win, I want to do it. Of course, legally within the rules and reasonably. I'm not going to just sit here and throw money. But I think if you're Oregon, you're looking at this conference realignment stuff. And that's probably one of the biggest parts of this decision, I think, for Oregon, is the fact that they're very well aware that they want to try and win a national championship. It's something that Phil has expressed repeatedly that is on his mind. And I think that is a piece of this conversation that, again, might not be, something for Arizona and Colorado. They're in different situations. So I believe that's part of it.
So you mentioned Dan Lanning's new contract, and it takes care of, I think, the thing that has been bugging Oregon for a while. And Oregon lost Willie Taggart to Florida State. They lost Mario Cristobal to Miami. Understandable on the Cristobal thing. It's his alma mater and everything, but he had a pretty significant buyout, but not as significant as Dan Lanning. So if you would like to hire Dan Lanning, if you're another school, if you'd like to hire Dan Lanning after this year, it will cost you $20 million. If you would like to hire Dan Lanning after next year, it will cost you $20 million. 3 years from now, $20 million. 4 years from now, $20 million. You see where I'm going with this. Justin, do you think they finally hit upon the formula to make sure nobody poaches their coach?
Yeah, it's funny. I kind of just talking to fans on my message board, it was like, hey, look, if something happened to Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, and they wanted Dan Lanning, there's no buyout that could keep those schools from coming. Well, and then the $20 million buyout comes out, and I think, yeah, that might do it. So by the time the $20 million buyout's there, and by the time, let's say, you've got to increase his $7 million salary that it is currently, you're talking probably $8 million, $9 million, whatever the number is. You're talking about $30 million if you want to hire Dan Lanning. I would imagine that he would have needed to won 2 national championships at that point for that to make sense to anybody. So yeah, I think Oregon kind of got it right here. It was a great contract for both sides. Obviously, Dan Lanning is earning more money. And the cool part is this is something Rob Mullins has never done in the past. He's never been this ambitious this early on in a coach's career to kind of re-up or renegotiate their salary. So it shows a commitment from that side, and then Dan Lanning rewarded him and said, hey, look, I'll agree to a $20 million buyout. So both sides got something at the table. And like you said, it gives Oregon that continuity that they've been chasing since the Chip Kelly, Mark Helfrich years.
I also think Dan Lanning is a little bit different situation than Willie Taggart and Mario Cristobal, who were guys that had been tied to a geographical region before they went out to Oregon. Dan Lanning's from Kansas. He's coached at Memphis. He's coached at Georgia. He's been in Alabama. He's been at Arizona State. Like, he's been in different places. And so there's no necessarily I'm going home situation. Well, I don't think Kansas can afford it. Let's be perfectly honest. But it feels like that also makes this situation different.
Yeah, it's like you said, I think fans knew when Willie Taggart came to Oregon, there was always this, hey, if Florida State ever opened, that'd be the one to watch. Well, Florida State hadn't opened in like 30 years. So
yeah.
You don't have to worry about it. No big deal. Of course, that year, Florida State opens. And
it hadn't opened in 40 years. They hired Bowden in 76 and went straight to Jimbo. So
yeah, I knew it was a while. Yeah. Yeah. And of course, and then Mario Cristobal, he said all the right things. And, he was committed to Oregon, but everybody knew there's one job that could open up. And of course it opened up. And then not to mention they opened up the checkbook for him. So, that's been tough. And like you said, Lanning's not tied to any one school, right? It's not like, for me, I said Georgia and Alabama just because it seems like, well, if he's leaving, he's going somewhere that's a proven winner. Those are the two that came to mind. But yeah, he doesn't have any special ties to those. He coached at them briefly, but it's not like he was tenured there for 10 years or anything like that.
Well, and I did the math. I had a friend and I did the math on what it would be if Texas A&M were to fire Jimbo Fisher and decide Dan Lanning was their guy, because Jimbo Fisher would be owed 25% of his buyout right off the bat. So if you would like to hire Dan Lanning, if you're Texas A&M and you decide to make a change and you would like to hire Dan Lanning, your total spend, including Lanning's salary, his buyout, what you have to pay Jimbo right away, your total spend is over $60 million up front.
Oh my
So
God.
I don't think you're doing that.
And it's crazy because college football's gotten so aggressive with money, right? It's just some of these salaries are out of hand. Like, it's unreal. But and we probably joke about that. And then next thing you know, they're making an offer to Dan Lanning in 2 years.
I know. I said all that. Somebody can clip this, and in November they might be like, yeah, they're doing it.
Yeah.
You said they wouldn't, but
all of a sudden Billy Lucci's reporting Texas A&M's pursuing Dan Lanning. We're like, what?
Well, listen, we all know Lucci here. Lucci could fund half of that himself. So
right, exactly.
It's not a problem. But yeah, it is pretty amazing. Now, let's talk about the Ducks on the field, because this is a roster I feel like, it's weird. We don't give Utah enough credit. They've won 2 Pac-12 titles in a row.
Yeah.
Everybody's on USC for good reason. They bring back the Heisman Trophy winner. They've revamped that roster even more. The body types look like, the teams that compete for national titles. But it feels like Oregon is right there in terms of talent and what they're bringing back.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's got USC as the favorite, and I totally get it, right? They're going to score buckets of points, all right? I mean, basically, to beat USC, you're going to have to probably score 45 points to beat them. Like, that's the reality. So, I mean, they're going to be in a lot of fun shootouts. They're going to be a lot of fun to watch. But I believe that if we're talking about those top 4 and we're saying USC, Washington, Oregon, and Utah, you could make a case for any of the 4. They're all good teams. I think Utah lost a lot. They might see a little bit of fall off this year, but they return Cam Rising. And Cam Rising's a darn good quarterback who might be like the 4th or 5th best quarterback in the conference, which is crazy.
Well, and you lose Dalton Kincaid as a first-round tight end, but Brant Kuithe comes back, who, by the way, Dalton Kincaid was playing behind before Brant Kuithe got hurt. So there's so much talent. We didn't mention Oregon State even, which won 10 games and brought almost everybody back. So yeah, it feels like a very fun league this year, but it also feels like Oregon has an opportunity, especially the way the schedule shakes out, to win it.
And that's the key. So right now, last year they opened up with Georgia, and we remember that beat down very well. Okay, that was a tough game. Tough way for your new head coach to play his first ever game as the head coach. But second game of the season is Texas Tech. Okay, they're going to be good. They're going to be really good. They're going to compete in the Big 12. That's a winnable game for Oregon, but it's also a very good measuring stick right away. And then you've got USC at home. That game is going to be epic. I mean, I imagine we'll see everybody under the sun out for that game at Autzen Stadium, Oregon versus USC, last time ever as Pac-12 opponents. That'll be big. You play Washington. I mean, Oregon's got some games that if they win, they're going to have not only, they need the wins, but they're going to have a great resume to boot.
Yeah. And that's the thing with the league being so strong this year. And that's the hardest thing with me watching all this other stuff, this realignment stuff go on. They should be able to celebrate in the Pac-12 having the deepest league they've had in, I don't even know how long. I mean, USC was a national power at one point, but it didn't feel like the rest of the league was quite up there with them in the early 2000s. This is a case where 5-6 teams look really good. And some of the other, like Arizona, feels ascendant. It feels like they're getting better. So it sucks that's, we had to lead off with 5 minutes of who's going to be in this league, but that's where we're at. So,
yeah, no, it's going to be I think people are going to be talking about the Pac-12 a lot this year, and deservedly so. It's going to be a ton of fun. And like you said, Arizona's getting better. Colorado's hired Dion and rejuvenated that program. Dillingham's going to be a terrific hire for ASU. Maybe not this year, but they're going to get there. And like you said, we have no idea what the conference will look like next year.
It is amazing, but we do know that there are going to be some good games this year. Justin, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We really don't know what the conference is going to look like next year, because while we were listening to me and Justin talk, a little more news broke. The Arizona Board of Regents at 5:52 Mountain Standard Time on Wednesday, which is 8:52 Eastern. If you don't know, Mountain Standard Time, they don't believe in daylight savings time in Arizona, but that's neither here nor there. They will have a meeting scheduled for the Arizona Board of Regents at 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time on Thursday. So 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Here's what they're talking about in executive session. So if we're on the live stream, all we're going to see is the call to order. But here's what they're going to talk about in the executive session. Pursuant to some Arizona laws that you don't care about, for a review of assignments for Arizona State University President Michael Crow and University of Arizona President Robert Robbins, also pursuant to some more Arizona laws you don't care about, for possible legal advice and discussion regarding university athletics. So that is not only Robert Robbins, the president of Arizona, that is also Michael Crow, the president of Arizona State. Now, from covering realignment before, if we're going by the order of operations, and this is different in every school, it's different in every state, different in every university system, but a lot of times one of the steps before a key decision gets made involving conference alignment, or probably accepting a big conference media rights deal, either one, is that the board gives the authority to the president to negotiate. And so I would say this looks like a strong sign that they would be giving the authority to those two presidents to negotiate conference affiliation, which might lead you to believe that maybe they're going to change conferences. So we'll see what happens. We will be covering that on Thursday night. We'll stay on late. We'll do whatever we got to do to cover that and make sure that you know about it. And I'm fascinated because you heard Dan Wetzel. We've been talking about all this. If Arizona and Arizona State move, I would also expect Utah to move. If that were to happen, then a lot of the kind of nuclear option stuff becomes on the table. So we'll pay attention all day tomorrow. With news may leak before that meeting. Remember, the board meeting where Colorado approved that they were going to move to the Big 12 from the Pac-12, it had already leaked the day before. We already knew exactly what was going to happen. So if I had to guess, I'd say that's what they're headed toward. But we will find out. For now, though, let's go back to the important business of actual football. Well, not actual football, acquiring actual football players. So if you were on the internet this weekend, you saw Elijah Dotson, who's a recruit. He was at Michigan on a visit, and he posted a picture of a plate of food, and it blew up. It was all over the internet. And I saw that thing, and I thought to myself, man, I need to talk to an expert about this. I need to talk to somebody who knows about cooking for recruits and who knows about good eating as a recruit. And I only know one person who was a star recruit who became a professional pitmaster, and that man's name is Shannon Snell. So, former Florida offensive lineman, current pitmaster, Shannon Snell joins the show. This was a big recruiting weekend everywhere around the country. Everybody had their big recruiting weekend. Alabama had, I think they call it the championship cookout. Michigan had folks. Ohio State had folks. Florida had folks. So we saw this food, and I'm using the term lightly, from Michigan. One of the recruits posted this. It's some sad little wholesale club chicken fingers. There's a hot dog. I see one grill mark. There's some mac and cheese. And I thought to myself, I need to have an expert on to discuss this, because I know a guy who does cook for recruits every once in a while. His name is Shannon Snell. Now, here's the thing about Shannon. He is the head pitmaster for all the Sonny's barbecues in North Central Florida. But Shannon also has been a blue chip recruit. He played for the Florida Gators. He played in the NFL. And Shannon, now I'm not going to age you here, but did they have stars for recruits when you were coming up? I'm trying to remember. You might have been one of the original 5 stars.
Yeah, so actually I was right below. I was rated like a top 4-star. I think it was 0.9888. I was right below that 5-star mark, so I'm not hating on it. I just found that out a couple of months ago when I checked it. I don't think that was checking back in the day.
I was gonna say that wasn't a thing you thought about in the late 90s, early 2000s, when all that stuff was just coming out, when you were a Hillsborough High School Terrier. So
yeah, it wasn't really a thing back then. We were just, stars didn't really matter. It was about getting to college and making things happen.
Now, let's talk about what you're doing now, though, because you are the head pitmaster, brand ambassador for Sonny's Barbecue in North Central Florida, which, by the way, is where Sonny's Barbecue was born. It was born in Gainesville, out on Waldo Road, right? So
that's correct.
You've been cooking for the folks at UF for a while, and they brought you in for their, what do they call it, Grill in the Ville, for their recruiting weekend this past weekend. So tell the folks what you made for the recruits that were in Gainesville.
All right, so every year we want to kind of step the game up, right? Because it is like the last opportunity that the recruits and the coaching staff are going to get together before the season starts. So you got to make a lasting impression. So we decided to do some baby back ribs, some St. Louis ribs. We did a strawberry shortcake. We did burn-ins. We did smoked wings. Some other stuff. We did a shrimp pasta, Alfredo shrimp pasta, and I smoked the shrimp. It was prime rib that we've done. So
your famous 7 cheese mac and cheese.
The 7 cheese mac and cheese, which is a homemade recipe. It literally has 7 different kinds of cheese in it, and it's baked. Got a nice golden crisp, nice golden topping on top of it. So we did it up, and it was fantastic. I love doing that kind of stuff.
Well, it's amazing to me to see the photos that you sent me of this stuff, because when we looked at the Michigan one, it got, well, cooked is probably the wrong word on social media. But let's take a look at this again. I want to post this plate one more time.
Listen,
you and I are from Florida. Publix would never with these chicken tenders.
They're not Publix chicken tenders. Those are the farthest thing from it. They're not even Publix cookies. Those things that's sad all the way around. And that's the thing, is like, when you don't ever want to have a plate like that posted. And I get it, some of these recruits make up their own plates, but ain't no way in heck that I know the University of Florida is going to have hot dogs at a really big time event, or boxed mac and cheese, or chicken tenders that look like they're not even real. So it is what it is. I guess that's what they do up north, but that's not what we do in the South.
And they've won 2 consecutive Big Ten titles, so whatever they're doing, they're probably doing it okay.
Listen, I
Jim
can't
Harbaugh
knock
says
them
they're going to
for
get 20 guys drafted. So
they've knocked
guess,
off Ohio State a couple of times too. So you can't really say that their recipe is in the food. So maybe it's something different.
So Shannon, I'm interested because you served as a guy who eats a lot of barbecue, who cooks it, but not nearly as well as you, but eats a lot of it. And I feel like I eat it very well. You went St. Louis ribs and baby backs.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
Sure did. Went both.
Is that because different people have different preferences? Do you have different preference in terms of which you prefer to cook?
Yeah, I was born and bred on St. Louis ribs. I like the belly. You know, the St. Louis ribs come from the belly of the hog, and they got a little bit more fat content. It's a little bit easier to cook those because, you know, just because you can mess up a little bit on it and they still come out fantastic. You know, baby backs don't have that intramuscular fat. If you overcook them, that's actually supposed to be a good thing. You want them nice and tender, but if you undercook them, you can end up messing them up. So, but I was just raised on St. Louis ribs. I love doing them. Whenever I go to a barbecue competition, recently I was on Barbecue USA on the Food Network, and
Nice.
That was one of the competitions we did, and we did St. Louis ribs. That's what wins competitions, so that's what I'm gonna stick with.
Well, and I love the just pillow of meat on top of a St. Louis rib. That's when you you can pull it like what people mess up is good barbecue is not fall off the bone. Fall
That's
off
right.
the bone is you boiled it. But when it's smoked properly, you're going to be able to tug it a little bit and it'll come off clean off the bone. And that pillow of meat, when you pull it off the bone, it's the perfect bite.
Yeah, when you get it right, Andy, it's like perfect. And just as you said, is your ribs are supposed to have a little bit of tug to it, not enough where you're trying to yank away at the bone, but enough when you bite into it, you get that nice, real even bite, and you see your teeth march into it. It's like the perfect storm when it comes to barbecue.
The burn ends also. So you're a Florida guy. That's a Kansas City, Texas kind of thing. Were there any Texas kids? I'm trying to remember the guest list on the recruiting weekend. I know DJ Lagway was there.
There you go. I was about to say you forget the
there you go.
Group. Yeah, yep. You know those burn ends are fantastic. I actually did Texas brisket as well. Nice. I love Texas beef, Texas brisket. I went out to Dallas maybe about 7 years ago, and you know I tasted brisket out there, and I said, "What is so different?" Because it was fantastic.
Yeah.
And all they do is garlic, salt, and pepper, and that's what they do, and they do it well. They believe the beef should speak for itself, and sure enough, I love it. So I've been trying to replicate that, and I came to a pretty good recipe ever since.
So it's more in how you trim it, right?
It is. So it's rounding the edges, actually squaring the brisket up and getting it to a point where the smoke flows evenly over top of it. You're only using certain kind of woods like oak, hickory, and mesquite. So you're not using a whole lot of different kinds of wood. A lot of times they're cooked on a stick burner, and garlic, salt, and pepper. Maybe a little bit of seasoned salt, maybe some celery salt, but that's it. No sugars, nothing that's weird. The beef is supposed to really talk for itself and let the smoke do the work.
So when you were growing up, did you cook quite a bit in your house, or did you cook as a college student, or when did this take hold?
It's funny. My grandfather used to cook when he was in the backyard. I used to be over in West Tampa. They had a house over there, and he had this big old barrel smoker, this big old offset barrel smoker. And I remember for like family reunions, that's where I would be at. I'd be out back probably because I just wanted to taste the ribs that he was bringing off before everybody else got some. But he'd be out there, and I'd be out there with him, and I just was so interested that he wouldn't have like a burner, wouldn't have electricity. Yet he was coming out with all this really dope barbecue. So I think it really kind of evolved from there because I always said I wanted to do something in the food industry, more specifically barbecue, because just of those times I would hang out with him and I would see this kind of stuff. It would be so fun. It would be so cool. And the smoke on proteins is like fantastic. It's one of my favorite things that I eat. And it really hasn't changed I'm going to go ahead and age myself, my 41 years of life.
We may have to make you the official show barbecue correspondent. I think we may have to do that because we're going to talk about it a lot on this show. I'm warning everybody that, I just moved over to On3. This is a fairly new show. There's some people who are new to me. we're going to talk about barbecue a lot on this show. So Shannon, hopefully you don't mind if I bug you every once in a while. I may send you some photos, be like, okay, I need a critique on this.
Andy, I don't mind at all. It's barbecue. I get to critique it, may get to try it, and heck, even might spark some neurons in my head to maybe start firing something else up myself. So feel free,
I
brother.
love
I'm
it.
open. You know that.
Thank you so much. And I'm very hungry now after looking at those
You
pictures you
both.
sent. Thank you, Shannon.
Yeah.
Go find some barbecue after that. But we do have one more thing to talk about. Obviously, we're going to have a big show tomorrow night because we got an Arizona Board of Regents meeting and some stuff's going to happen. And like I was saying before, when they are authorizing the two presidents, Arizona and Arizona State's, to make deals regarding conference affiliation, which probably is what they're talking about, it usually means there's movement afoot. So this could be it for the Pac-12. We'll see. We've said that about the Big 12 before. We've had people say the Big 12 is dead, and then the Big 12 rose from the dead. So we're not going to say anything definitive until we know what's happening, but it definitely seems like that movement is coming, and we'll have to see exactly how it plays out. And all this makes me think about a statement that one of the Florida State trustees made in their meeting today, a trustee named Deborah Sargent, and she was talking about where Florida State finds itself, where they don't want to be in this position. They'd rather be happy with their conference affiliation, but this is just what they've been pushed into. And if you're Oregon, if you're Washington, you probably feel the same way. You know, as soon as USC and UCLA left, you got pushed into a situation. Arizona State, Utah, probably also feeling the same way. So everybody's here, and we're all at DEF CON 1. And so Deborah Sargent said this today, and I found it very fitting.
And so we have to do what we have to do, but it would be with, very humbly in a way that we don't want to have to do this, but we have to do what it takes to compete. I think we just need to believe in ourselves and what we have. If this is a game of chicken, I hope it's not.
It's a giant game of chicken. That's all it is. It's a giant game of chicken. And we're going to see who runs into who. Maybe tomorrow. We'll talk to you later.